We're excited to have Janice J. Johnson with us today. She's a community organizer and previous nonprofit director, and she's here to show us how we can get into some good trouble. Jay?
Okay. Let me see. I guess I should be saying good morning. It's afternoon here on the East Coast, but good morning to all of you. I'm glad to join you today. Victoria, that was a wonderful reading that you did. Please stay with it, okay? Really, really good. We need to pay attention to what's happening in our lives and record that for history, okay? Thank you, and I am glad to be with you and to be with a group of people who obviously like each other, so that's good. Okay, I'm going to do kind of a brief introduction of myself. I'm an 82-year-old who was raised in an intergenerational household in a small southern town, very segregated southern town during my years growing up. We lived, my mother, my father, and myself lived with his parents in the home that his father owned. And there were things that were expected of us. During my lifetime, I have been identified as colored, Negro, Afro-American, African-American, and Black, and some other words that probably were not said to my face. So it's kind of like when you reach this age and you've seen this much of what's happening in America, sometimes you need to think back on, you know, kind of like where you started. And that is where I started, in that house on Back River Road, with certain expectations of my behavior, particularly in my family. There were things you did not do, and you were always sort of emulating white people to be successful and to get ahead, because that was the model that everybody had. And it was kind of like they were ahead and you're running to catch up, and no matter how fast you run, you're still only going to get halfway. This was particularly interesting, and I think maybe even more being pushed in my household than some others, because my grandfather actually was born on a plantation, whereas my grandmother had been born free. So there were a lot of different interpretations of what we were supposed to do. But education was key. You had to succeed, you had to achieve. That was true at home, in our all-Negro schools, and even in our churches. Dropping out was not an option, and getting in trouble with the law was definitely not something that you were supposed to do. So when, you know, there's no such thing when I grew up as good trouble, okay? Yes, no such thing. But just like John Lewis, I and every other Black person in America has lots of stories about discrimination and racism. He had a lot more stories about things that he did because he stepped out a lot more than some of the other people did. During the time when you grew up in a segregated community, there were places you could go, places you couldn't go. And so as a young person, when you got out beyond your neighborhood, you were super cautious and kind of looked like your head was on a swivel, because you always had to know where you were and what were your expectations in that place. So John Lewis was a courageous guy. I mean, when he decided to get in good trouble, he committed himself totally to it. You know what we say about the pig? When the pig gives up what you're going to eat from him, he gives his whole body. There's nothing left. You know, a chicken can give an egg, but a pig, if you're going to eat ham or bacon, the pig has dedicated his whole life to your meal. John Lewis really dedicated himself to what he believed in, and in good trouble. In 2014, I was one of the speakers at a national meeting of over 1,000 progressives from all over the United States. And I thought 2014 ought to be the right time. So this was my message to them. I'm Black. I've been Black all of my life, and all of my life people have been telling me to wait for old people to die and for young people to grow up. And it's not working, people. It's not working. We have to do something. Well, everybody applauded, you know, they were shouting and cheering in the back of the room. And I thought, okay, you know, these people coming together in this new organization, we're really going to get something done. After that, total silence. I said, okay, if not here, and if not now, when? So I came back home to Virginia and just kept working on dismantling racism in my own community and in the state of Virginia. Lo and behold, here comes 2020. 2020. Folk woke up, didn't they? But look what it took. I am a full-fledged adult who never saw anyone murdered before my eyes. Never. And yet, with increasing frequency in these past few years, it looks like almost, in the last 4 months, it's been almost every month, we've seen the murder of a Black man or a Black woman. And I cannot tell you what that feels like. You know, when I was growing up, we were taught that we had to represent the race. We were responsible for all Black people. And I mean, for years, I went around feeling like I had millions of Black people on my shoulders because it was important. How you acted was how other people were going to see Black people. And so you had to act the right way and talk the right way and be the right way. Everything was about whatever was right. And so here are Black people getting killed so regularly that I am haunted by my childhood, that I am supposed to represent and be responsible. And what is happening here? What is happening? And for myself, and I know for a lot of other Black people, we felt like we were just in a state of perpetual mourning, that it just never stops. And I was so frustrated that I had to look at the protests so that I could think positive, that all of these people have come out, that they are protesting, that, you know, white people have finally woke up, and then here all these other minority groups have joined in unity, you know, in all of these protests. All these young people, finally, the young people they told me to wait to grow up are here, you know, finally. But I couldn't. If I had started crying, I think my heart would have broken. So I didn't. But inside of me, there was this mourning. Until one day I was watching the newscast about the protest. And there was this young woman, beautiful young woman with tears, just tears streaming down her face. You know, perspiration, a mask, you know, under her chin. And she's yelling into the microphone of this reporter, America needs to be glad that we want justice and not revenge. America, yes, should be glad that we want justice and not revenge. And I go back to, this was John Lewis. John Lewis was about justice. And he was about justice given with love and peace. And so in our time of anguish, we have to have models like John Lewis. You have to have somewhere to hang your hat. Because if you get embroiled in the frustration, the anger, and let it become hate, you lose all ability to be reasoned with or to reason with others. So we have to pay attention, not only to what's happening, but to how we feel about that and what are we going to do about that. One thing I'm going to encourage you to do before I start talking specifically about what we're going to do about that. I'm a history nut, and I believe that people who do not know their history are bound to repeat it. One of the disadvantages we have in America is that most of the history we learn is white history. I'm going to encourage you, and particularly those of you who are parents, to look at the history books and see how many Black people, indigenous people, people of color are in those history books. You need to know, you need to begin to pay attention, okay? Because the history of the United States is not a pretty history. And I'm not going to belabor that history because I'm more interested really in what we do with the future. But we cannot really appreciate a future until we know where we have come from, individually and collectively. We believe in this country, then we need to study the country as well as ourselves. And it is super important right now. And as you're reading, if you do not have a copy of the Constitution, or you don't, hey, you need to have a pocket-sized copy of the Constitution and put it in your pocket and purse and carry it around with you. Because there are some crazy people out here who will tell you anything and make it sound good, okay? But people who know things cannot, if you fool me once, shame on me. If you fool me twice, hey, okay? So listen, let's get about the business here. Now that I've given you my little history lesson, lecture. And you need to know that too, because, people are really confused about taking down all these Confederate statues. By the way, you've got one in California too. I don't know where it is, but I saw it on the map the other day. So don't think that you're away from all of this. You got one up for that way you need to take care of. But, as you read the history, it will begin to make sense to you. The other thing is not only people are protesting out there marching, but people were reading. I looked at the paperback list in July, and at least 7 or 8 of the top 10 books had something to do with race. And I said, okay, people are not only walking, they're also reading. And that becomes important. Now, we can't all be protesters. And some of us, I'm not a protest kind of person. I've been out there for some social issues because I belong to a very active organization in this whole state of Virginia. So I have to show my face in a place. But I'm really the kind of person that wants to know, what are we going to do next? There's some people on the street, but there also have to be people who are strategizing what needs to happen after this, okay? So that, all of this energy that's going into walking in the streets, somebody's got to have the energy to take it and put it on sheets of paper and get it somewhere else. So everybody has a role to play. So I'm going to say that to you very clearly, because in Hampton, which is still a small town in the scheme of things, we got 157,000 people, but we still have that kind of small town flavor. And so we're walking around the block. One of my book club members sent me a picture of this lady who's got to be about 70, standing in her yard with her cane in her hand, with her sign stuck in the ground that said Black Lives Matter. So don't tell me during the pandemic you can't make a difference, because you can. Yes. I loved her. White lady, white hair, much determination. Loved it. So what can you do? And what can you do to make a difference? And as I'm saying and talking about these things, I want you to understand that white people aren't the only ones that have work to do. We grew up in America, we've all got some kind of biases. I live in a neighborhood that used to be prestigious. I say that probably before I moved there. But on the waterfront, all the Black elite who moved there when the Jewish people moved out. We are one of these neighborhoods, the Jewish people moved out, the Black people moved in. Now the white people are moving in. And I caught myself. I came around the corner and I saw this white couple moving in. I said, oh my gosh, here comes another white person. And I had to pay attention to Jesus. What are you saying? There goes the neighborhood. But we cannot grow up in America and not have some biases The thing we need to do is to look at them, pay attention to them. And if we need to get rid of them, just get rid of them. Find a way to stop thinking that, stop saying that. We had to abandon the N word in our house. We had some friends who were just, no, that word will not cross this threshold. I don't care how young you are, what you think it is, okay? It will not cross this threshold. Okay, I'm gonna recommend 2 books to you, even if you're not white. You know, white people have a lot of work to do because they've been the most benefited through the history. But when I read the review of White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, I started laughing. You know, what do white people have to be fragile about? You know? I mean, they've had it good all these years. But as I read the book, and I did read it, it's good, you know, because it gives you the terminology and it gives you fantastic examples. And I'm glad I read it because I am better able to cope and understand some of the behaviors I'm encountering, you know, as I try to work with people. So that was good. But this is the book I really want you to get into if you are a white person. This book is called Me and White Supremacy. Combat Racism, Change the World, and Become a Good Ancestor. And what she does in this book, Lali Said, I'm going to say it, I'm probably not pronouncing it right. But what she does in this book is she gives 28 days of exercises. And you can just read it as an intellectual thing if you want to. But if you are white, you need to journal, put the pen to the paper while you're doing those exercises. And it will help to make a difference. Now, let me say this to you. None of this is easy, okay? You're not walking on an easy street, particularly if you're white and you think everybody's mad at you just for being white, which is not true. But it's not gonna be easy. You're gonna find some things out about yourself that you really don't like, did not acknowledge, and or may have intentionally hidden all of this time, okay? Now let's get into some other good trouble. People, you must vote. Not only must you vote, you must convince everybody you know to vote. Okay, this country is in trouble and it's gonna be in more trouble if we don't vote. Now, voting is not just about patriotism. Voting is an entirely selfish act. You vote for the people that you think will let you do what needs to be done for this country. Not what they're going to do. Because if we waited for policyholders and politicians to do the right thing, we would turn into mummies on our couches. Citizenship is not a spectator sport. You have to hold them accountable, yes, and be mean to them. Call them, text them, email them, write letters to the editor. You voted for them, you did not crown them, okay? So, get that straight. Vote, and you make sure everybody else votes. And tell them, I don't want to hear any woosiness about what nobody did for you. That's crazy. And I'll tell you what, vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Your life depends on your vote. At this moment, you can say that more than any other time in history, except when we were trying to come out of slavery, okay? All right. Now, do your homework about the issues you care about. What matters to you? Where do you stand on it? What is the history? Always the history. You have to know where that thing came from, okay? Why it is like it is now, so that you can say, why not? Always, why not? Somebody said, doesn't make sense to you, you say, why not? Okay? So it's not always about why. Sometimes it's about why not. And sometimes the why not purely has to do with inconvenience. It has nothing to do with money. It means somebody needs to get up off the sofa, the couch, out of their chair, and use their brains. So test them. Why not? Okay, now listen, I want you to hear this. I'm going to use this one example because my time is running out, but it'll show you what I'm talking about. You have been helping people who don't have homes. There's this consortium in San Diego, has a long name, I don't know, but it was in the paper, so you can look it up. All right. They pledged that for the pandemic, they would find housing for 700 people by September 1. They made it for 500 people. My question to you is this: if they could do that in a pandemic, why couldn't they do it in so-called normal times? All right? And those are the kind of questions you need to ask. In your state legislature, SB, I think it's 1120, and SB maybe 1185. If you look one up, you'll find the other one, were to help with affordable housing. Okay? They both would have passed if the assembly had not adjourned on that Friday. All right? So my question to you is, what are these bills about? You know affordable housing is needed in California. That's why you're helping people who are on the street. What are they about? Are they decent bills? What is it you as a citizen needs to be doing to see if those bills come up the next time they actually pass? Okay? That is the kind of thing that you have to do. When you see something, you must say something. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to be careful about what you say, because we still need to be civil, all right? But if you see something, say something. And be sure when you say it that you know about it. Don't go off half-cocked, right? That doesn't do any of us any good. But when you know it, nobody can take that away from you. You see, you've got the argument beat from the beginning. Okay, what is it you're gonna do? You're gonna look at yourself, you're gonna figure out what you care about, you're gonna find out who else cares about it, you're gonna study it deeply, and you're gonna decide what actions need to be taken to change, okay? You've got police officers in your schools. Why? Why are they there? What are they doing? Are they doing the discipline that teachers and principals should be doing? In Virginia, we have something with resource officers in school we call the school to prison pipeline, and it is real. Is it happening where you live? Do you know? Do you know? Okay? You cannot be a good citizen in America today and be passive, folks. That's just where it is, okay? Okay, so as you go about the business of getting a good choice, have you had enough? If you haven't, my time is out anyway, but I'm going to stay for a half hour after the end. So if anybody that wants to follow up, we can break together. Okay. Okay, so as you're getting into good trouble, remember this. This is John Lewis speaking to you now. Freedom is not a state. It is an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we all must take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair, more just society. So go get in some good trouble, people. There are over 100 nonprofits in San Diego. Somebody's got to be doing something you care about.